What's going on, guys? It's your friend Jonathan Frederick. I've been getting a lot of questions about how do you start a successful podcast? How do you get these guests on your show? I think the question is a little bit more philosophical, perhaps maybe even goes a bit deeper than just how did you land Ed Milet so quickly into your new show. We'll jump into that in this video. Welcome back to the channel, guys. If you haven't yet, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below and also hit the like button, the thumbs up button for me. 5 things that will help you to start a successful podcast and land incredible guests. Amazingly, when I started this podcast journey, I did not think that the biggest question I would be asked is, how do you get high-profile guests on your show? I want you all to know, this question I think goes deeper than just how do you get a podcast, how do you start a successful podcast is a popular question, right? Let's start there. Firstly, it isn't how do you start a successful podcast, it's how do you go about successfully pursue something that you have wanted to do or that you want to do. And that's really one of the biggest questions that we answer with the Hard Healthy Hustle. I bring on guests who can personify success for you and can lead you to a place of realizing that you do have what it takes and that you should go for it. Now, one of the bigger things here is not how do you get a guest on your show, how do you start a successful podcast. I'm going to show you guys exactly what I did. First and foremost, I have to credit God and my faith. No matter what you believe, I respect you and your beliefs. I've seen it work in my life in incredible ways. I literally will ask God for certain guests. And yes, I'm hyper intentional. I take action. And yes, I do what I can possibly do. The second thing is delving into personal development, delving into faith. I found a lot of inner work of my character that wouldn't have allowed me to consistently pursue a successful vision that I have. I wouldn't have been able to stay in the game. I wouldn't have been prepared for the weight of responsibility, of influence, of the remarkable nature of high-profile guests, handling those interviews professionally, every guest. So a big secret, number 2, I always encourage people to be an intrapreneur. Whether you are working as an independent contractor, whether you're working as a business owner, I always encourage people, wherever you are, try your best to enjoy it and give it your absolute all. And that will then help lead you to your next step, to the next chapter much sooner. And be willing to work, be willing to learn from other people who are ahead of you, not just the incredible billionaires or the multimillionaires we all see on social media, but people who are just a little ahead of you, a couple years ahead of you. Ask them questions, be curious, be a learner, be a student, let people help you. Ask for help, do it genuinely and provide reciprocal value. Say, hey, I can work for you for free. Can I learn from your innovative ways in the way you're approaching real estate, in whatever industry you're in? This will help you over time if you consistently implement this to succeed at much faster rates than you would have if you were just a know-it-all or refused to ask for help or ask for advice from anyone who is ahead of you. Third, it's easier than you think. It's so much easier than you think. That's number 3. Fourth, we have to remember the importance of pre-deciding before you get into something like a podcast, before you get into any new endeavor that you want to go about. And if you're going to do this, you have to commit ahead of time to go all the way. I just got off the phone with a CEO of a present-day relevant important company, and he's been doing a lot of interviews, so it's not like a big deal. But at the same time, I mean, this guy's circle of friends and influence is the movers and shakers of today's economy. Period. I mean, he knows people in Silicon Valley. You have to pre-decide and commit to go all the way before you start, regardless of reciprocity. Unleash your growth potential by pre-deciding, pre-committing. And what that means is that no matter what, as the saying goes, come heck or high water, you're going to consistently and continuously go after this all the way. That doesn't mean quit your job and jump into something foolishly. What that means is, it does feel good to create content, explore creative outlets, things like that. However, be sure that you're prepared internally. Make sure your character is being forged so that when you get to that point that you so badly claim you want to be at, you're ready to handle it and you don't just all come crashing down. How many times have we seen successful people build a house of cards that then just falls when the first little breeze comes along? So keep that in mind. That is amazing advice I've received across multiple different mentorships. Getting high-profile guests is not what it's all about. Going back to the teaching, everyone's a teacher. Opportunity can't knock if it doesn't know where you live. It's okay to understand that It's going to be a journey. It's going to be tough. But realize that you can do it. Realize it's possible. Go to udemy.com, and that's udemy.com. I'm not affiliated with them, but they have some great courses. And one of the courses I've taken was called Podcast Blueprint by Andrew Ferebee. He's the host of a very successful podcast show. And I actually was on a Skype call with him a couple years ago when I was first started brainstorming about this show. And he told me this is a course I made. That course literally takes you from point A to having a successful podcast and distributing it. Some of the stuff isn't as present day important as it would have been, but it's still a great course to get you off the ground. $10, guys, $10. So that's a great place to start. A lot of people will reach out to me, hey, how do you do this? What do you use to record your calls? Do you use Skype? What kind of mic do you use? All this stuff is answered in those courses. Also, look up John Lee Dumas, Podcast Paradise. He already has stuff made, set up for the masses that you can use and implement that works. And that is another course on Udemy, I believe for like 10 or 12 bucks. So go ahead and get that one. I haven't taken it, but I assure you it's probably very similar to the one I aforementioned. Just for 20 bucks, you're already getting a ton of value on how to launch your own successful podcast. Now, going back to the beginning of this video, I shared with you, I said, hey, I think this is a deeper thing, a more philosophical thing than just how do you do that. Yes, I can give you all the tactical steps, and yes, I'm going to do more videos of tactical advice in terms of how to land high profile guests, how to stay consistent, how to master your workflow systemization so that you can almost automate the processes and create more content and focus on actually getting an amazing, incredible interview versus, oh my gosh, I have to keep editing this before the time runs out for the next interview. You want to have all this stuff in the bag. You want to have all this stuff in the queue, in the cache, if you will, so that you can focus on what's present important, which is the creative side of what you're doing, the interview process, the connection with the individuals you're connecting with, your audience. Before you get into something like this, make sure you are making your bed in the morning, as stupid as that may sound to you. Make sure you're drinking a lot of water. Make sure you want to make sure you're doing these small daily habits so you're giving yourself that slight edge. It's an amazing book, by the way, called The Slight Edge. John Lee Dumas, we just did an interview with him, founder and host of Entrepreneurs on Fire, the top entrepreneurial podcast for I think 5 years straight or more. They made $140,000 revenue through their sponsorships on January alone. He recommended that book to me. 5. What is number 5 for how to start a successful project? Number 5 is belief. Not just in yourself or your abilities, but the belief that no matter what happens in this process, it's going to be worth it. If you're going into this, we've all heard it hundreds of times, don't go into stuff for the money. If you're going into something for the money, that's fine. I will make money with my podcast eventually. I understand that. I'm going to monetize things. Readiness is vital. And to consistently maintain readiness for when you're going to monetize things, for when you're going to land that humongous guest, for when your show takes off in popularity, there's absolutely no guarantee. So you have to understand from the get that what you're working on is worth it. You have to believe that, or else you won't be able to consistently be produced. You will stop caring as much. You won't put as much effort into the interviews. You'll just think, okay, how do I get another mundane guest for this week's podcast? And that happens with so many podcasts I've seen where then they pod fade, which is essentially when they stop podcasting, or they get really shoddy with their publishing schedule. They're not consistent, they're not reliable, the show stops being produced consistently, and they just kind of start getting guests no one really cares to hear from, or they're fake success, and things get really weird. So you want to do something where you believe in advance that regardless of what ROI comes out of your efforts, it's been worth it. So for me, this show has 100% been worth it for me to pursue because I know that I'm learning. When I started this show, I was in need to connect with other proactive young professionals. It was a deep need of mine. I was isolated. I had moved to a new area. I needed to keep putting myself out there. This podcast is really going to show me what's possible when you keep consistently commit to pressing on and putting yourself out there. And it showed me that virtually anything is possible. And the belief that I have that it's worth it for me to consistently produce this show is overwhelming, and I'm so appreciative and so grateful for the opportunity and the experience that it's given me and all the growth and all the learning that I've been able to go through and also share with you. As I gain advice from other people who I've interviewed, I'm learning to treat each and every call like it's a mentorship or even a coaching call for me and where I'm at in my business and my life. And so that allows me to work with the guest to come to valuable conclusions that are actionable in your life as well as the listeners, so everyone gets something valuable from the show. If I was going into this without the belief that I was getting an ROI immediately from interviewing with these individuals, this show would go nowhere. If I was just coming at this like, I'm gonna make a podcast and interview these people, and once I do, I'll be rich or something, that is absolutely not true. It is absolutely not true. Yes, you can start something if you want to operate something like that from a business point of view, but in terms of connecting with your audience authentically, being sincere in your approach to interviews, not wasting your guest's time in any capacity, you have to remember to respect these individuals' time highly, then you'll win. Otherwise, you will lose long term. And when I say lose, I don't mean you'll be a failure. I just mean you'll lose in that endeavor. It's not going to fulfill you. It's long term, in my opinion. So that being said, I wanted to share this with you guys. I've been getting a lot of questions about this. So to review, this is a philosophical decision. You have to pre-decide ahead of time that you're going to consistently produce this show. Are you willing? Ask yourself, am I willing to do this for one, not two, but at least 3 years straight with no ROI? Now, I'm gonna almost guarantee you will probably see ROI, perhaps not financial or monetary, but there will be ROI along the way, regardless of what ROI you want or expect or thought you wanted. Because I guarantee you along the way, there are going to be things that come up. People unsolicited will reach out to you and say, hey, like this episode really encouraged me today. This episode inspired me. This guest talked about this issue, which is something I've been dealing with for a long time, and this interview provided me a lot of breakthrough. Not to mention the ROI you instantly get from interviewing with these people, from talking with them directly. I'm going to talk about my top 5 tips that I wish I knew when I started podcasting.